Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. And it's Monday and Edwin is here, our property insider. Hi Edwin.
G'day Martin, how have you been?
Yeah, pretty good. Lots going on. You?
Yeah, look, there's a lot going on. I'm trying to keep a low profile. There's a lot of Russian disinformation and collusion and all sorts of things. There's a laptop that's gone to some intelligence agency in the States. Fox News has got one, and I've also got one. I don't know what's in this hard drive, Martin. But if your name's Biden or Hunter or anything like, or the big guy, I've got the third laptop. If you're interested,
the third laptop. It's very good. Okay. Talking about information and disinformation, you could also go to the AFR and get the same stuff.
Well, maybe actually, let me have a look. I'll open up. I think it's CoreLogic. It's got on there a sticker saying CoreLogic.
Okay, right. Well, the AFR published an article sort of broadcasting from the rooftops that Sydney auction clearances were strong, pointing to rising prices. Well, no surprise there, but hey, where are they coming from?
Look, this is again, Martin. I don't know how many times you and I have to thrash this out. But it's rather interesting how they persist on relying on percentages as opposed to relying on numbers. If you look at it very, very closely, you'll see that I believe last week and the week before we were closer to the 380 sales particularly in Sydney. With respect to actual property sold by way of auction. And this week, we've only got something like 340, 337 or something, 340. So in actual fact, the numbers have gone down. So, and yet they come up with these articles saying that things are getting better. Now look, this has even fooled the best of us, Martin. These statistics if you propagate it enough, if you say it enough, you're going to start believing, and they're going to start believing some of your own shit. And this is what I feel a lot of them are starting to do. But when we start taking these figures to task, like we should, we realise that there's actual less numbers being sold by way of auction on the day as opposed to the previous week. That's where the article, if you're going to take a stance, take that stance. Why is there less, and yet the percentage numbers have gone up? But as I said, man, it's fooling the best of us, and some of our followers on Twitter are getting all excited and calling it some sort of a rebound as well. I see otherwise.
So just to be clear, that lower number that comes from which source?
Look, the lower numbers actually, I follow the domain numbers,
right.
And if you look at the domain numbers in comparison to the REA and the CoreLogic numbers, if you look at it very closely, CoreLogic and REA generally reflect the New South Wales numbers as opposed to the Sydney. But what they do is, I guess, whatever narrative fits better, or whatever numbers fits the narrative better, are the numbers that they'll use. So they'll use the overall New South Wales numbers if that paints a better picture of a rising market, as opposed to focusing on the Sydney region numbers or the Melbourne region numbers, which is what I've been focusing on for years. I mean, look, I use domain because their model is a lot easier to follow with regards to the Sydney region or Melbourne region or any other city regions for that matter. Whereas real estate expand theirs, retract it, and so do CoreLogic. They float whichever way the wind's blowing.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So what you're saying is that the geographic coverage is variable depending on precisely where the activity has been, and they pick and choose. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. On the one hand, so geographically, look, I I have said before, we've spoken about it before, and there are certain regions in Sydney that are going great guns with respect to sales. And why? It's because of these shifting sands that we've spoken about, with the demographic changes based on what's happening now with COVID-19. It's all the populations in across the city and the regions. It's a shifting sand, Martin, what's happening right now. So I can see where people are polarizing towards with regards to moving, relocating for a better lifestyle, because in their minds, or in all of our minds, is that thought: if this happened in 2020, what's going to happen in 2021 and 2022, 2023, and how our children, our grandchildren, going to have a safe living environment moving forward? Because this, 2020, what's happened in 2020 with regard to COVID-19 has absolutely revolutionised the way we live, the way we approach things, and it will continue to change things moving forward. Things will just not be the same. It's a new chapter for many industries moving forward.
Right, that's very interesting. And what about the clearance rates then? So how are you reading those? And because I've seen all sorts of different numbers, from the SQM ones through to various others, and they're all over the place again, aren't they? Very big differences.
Look, there are. Admittedly, Louis Christopher has a better indicator with regards to actually what happens on the ground, because I know that they scrape the data from various sources, no different to the sources that I get our information from. I get it from various sources, multiple sources, but predominantly when you start looking at it very closely with regards to the actual numbers that are being listed for sale by way of auction on the day, it's a different kettle of fish with what actually happens on a week-by-week basis. And look, our followers have also noted many times over and over again how there's been a lot of discrepancies. CoreLogic, REA, and even Domain for that matter, they include previous auctions. There are a lot of discrepancies. But look, overall, I give it to SQM. They do have more consistent and more numbers, which are real, which they're closer to the ones that I follow, the ones that we have and we put out, but not just because of that, but because there is a lot of thought being put behind it, and SQM aren't moved or swayed as much by CoreLogic and Domain or REA for that matter. Maybe Louis needs to get one of these as well.
Very good. And you've also sent CoreLogic a tweet suggesting they might want to make some tweaks.
That's right, man. Well, that flies in the face of the author of the article, doesn't it? Those figures or what I put there flies in the face of what the first sentence of the first paragraph says. That it's a steady improving auction clearance rates is a clear indicator, or a clear indicator of the uptick in the property prices. Is it really? If that was the case, then why aren't CoreLogic reporting the what's happening live? Because that is live data, Martin. That is live, and they haven't. I've reached out to Tim before. I've reached out to CoreLogic with regards to 96 Millwood, what's happened, but they haven't updated it. If anything, there's been very little change, and in a lot of cases, what you end up getting is at the beginning of the campaign, you even have a lower bandwidth of a price predicted by the hedonic to the middle of the campaign and the end of the campaign, where I see incremental rises of anywhere between 5 and 10%, and yet the actual sales on the day or pre-auction are miles apart, are worlds apart, Martin. And that's what that's been my beef, is that they're not updating, and therefore their figures are flawed. The whole system is flawed, and they need to come clean.
And the point there, of course, is that AFR religiously quotes CoreLogic. Surprise, surprise. And what you're casting sort of a shining light on is that some of those numbers, which are shown, for public consumption, aren't actually adapting to what's really going on.
Well, that's correct, and obviously the other things that don't pick up, but square meter research or SQM do pick up, and that is the 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 asking prices in comparison to the selling prices. But again, we when we start relying on a number of these data houses, property data houses, we find out that look, there's a lag, and the lag is anywhere between 60 to 72 days, best case scenario. Why? Because until those sale prices are confirmed by the Valuer General, until those sale prices are confirmed by the Lands and Titles Office, well, you're not going to have clarity. I've said it before, and I continue to say it, that CoreLogic's argument is one of the biggest arguments, is that 70% of the data source is reliant on the honesty and efficacy of the real estate industry. So therefore, one would assume that 100% of real estate agents are honest and truthful with what they disclose. I mean, that's that's a big call.
Heaven forfend, are you saying that real estate agents aren't honest?
Not all, Martin. Not all. let me
Shock
bust your bubble.
I am shocked and surprised, Edwin. I really am.
Yeah, and we can see that with regards to the, to all these underhandedness. There's no other word for it, but it's misleading the general public by this underhanded withholding of actual prices, withholding of actual information. There really needs to be an investigation, and we need to have a reset as to how property data is disseminated or propagated to the greater community. Because, as I said before, and I'll continue to say it has a huge impact. We're not dealing with $150,000 homes anymore, $250,000 homes. We're dealing with upwards of $750,000, $1 million, $2 million, which will have great impact on families for a very, very long time.
Mm. Yeah, well, it is important because, people can be misled by some of those sort of relatively simple articles that are written with perhaps not a huge amount behind them, and then quote a source which people probably don't really understand where it comes from and what the limitations of those sources are. And of course, many of the sources go out of the way to be vague and obtuse as to precisely how the information is actually cooked up, right? So it's not always completely clear as to what information sources are actually being used, how they're being applied, and what the assumptions are. So I always say to people, just take everything with a big pinch of salt, and don't get misled. But again, looking at another article, now CoreLogic has come out and said the new listings are soaring in Melbourne, and so expected to overtake Sydney. Whoopee.
Well, yeah. Well, look, if you do look at the sales listings in Melbourne in comparison to Sydney, they, as I posted out last week in one of my tweets there, I did a screenshot of the Melbourne numbers, and I did a screenshot of the Sydney numbers on the day, and I shared it on online. And you've got something like 34,000 listings for sale in Melbourne across the board, in comparison to 18,500 or closer to 19,000 listings for sale in Sydney across the board. And in Sydney, we've got something like we this week or last week we peaked at 8,536 listings for sale, freestanding homes. And yet in Melbourne, with regard to freestanding homes, you've got something like 22,000 freestanding homes for sale, which is staggering. I mean, you just got to wonder how many people are really wanting to do the exodus. How many people have just been waiting for the borders to be opened up so they can move out. So one of the points that the article says is, is this the beginning of the boom? I think the opposite. I think this is the beginning for the Melbournians of a massive fall in prices, because I don't believe that the buyers are there, Martin. Likewise, I don't believe that the buyers are really there in Sydney, other than the ones that have just jumped in the last over the last month or so. for further fear of missing out, because again, CoreLogic, the RBA that rely on CoreLogic, the banks that rely on CoreLogic, the mainstream media that relies on the CoreLogic data, haven't been truthful with the information that they've been putting out. So people have, I don't call it a dead cat bounce, I call it a dead elephant bounce, because that's how hard it's going to hit, and it's not going to bounce much, other than we're going to get a massive topple on effect or topple over effect post the removal of all the government freebies that we've been getting for the last 7 or 8 months.
Well, I think it's true that elephants don't bounce very well. They're the wrong shape. So I quite like the idea of, a dead elephant bounce. That's about it. Leaves a big crater, but doesn't actually, lift off the ground very much. And yet, you shared a message from one of your followers with regard to Melbourne, which I found quite interesting.
Look, it is, and looking at it on the serious side of things, it's a real heartfelt message. It's something that I thought it would be important to bring up to our audience and to let them know. There's a lot of pain down there, Martin, and people are going to be making the decisions. Still, those that can have already, as we've been talking now for quite a number of weeks, our colleagues and associates and people in Queensland, and over this week I've been getting a lot of messages from colleagues and other people in followers in Adelaide, how they're people buying sight unseen, buying property sight unseen, has just risen. These are people that are from Melbourne that are buying property sight unseen, has just been risen so much, and it's getting obviously they're liking it because the properties are being sold and they're achieving higher prices than before. But again, it's this shifting sands. The people that can are obviously the ones that have either got no mortgages in Melbourne, they've got no, they're not tied down, or they can sell. And get whatever they want to get, whatever they can, because they're not tied up to any banking institution, and they can move on. They can relocate. A lot of the people that have reached out to me to see if I can assist them in areas such as Adelaide and in Melbourne, in Queensland, have been people that can work remotely from anywhere in Australia, and they've chosen to move to the Gold Coast or to move to Adelaide. And so anecdotally, this is what we're getting. We're getting more reports obviously on the Twitter feeds. We're getting more reports by way of direct messaging. But this is what's happened with all that pressure that the Melbourneians have been under over the last, particularly over the last few months. And I think it's going to be a massive exodus. We talked about it a few weeks back as well, Martin.
Well, it's interesting because in my Spotlight series, I've been looking in detail at individual postcodes across the country and did a couple up in Queensland. And one of the things that came out in that research was there have definitely been some interstate transactions from particularly Victoria, where people have just bought pretty much anything off, sight unseen, just to get out, it looks like. So I think that validates that. The other interesting thing is that the moves between close into Melbourne and further out into slightly more regional areas, or Mornington Peninsula, is very interesting, right? So the supply-demand disequilibrium close in is absolutely massive. Massive amounts of units being listed for very little chance of selling. Whereas further out, it's quite a different story. So I think you have to again go quite granular to really understand what's going on. But I just can't fathom the number of properties that are listed now, or from my surveys are likely to be listed ahead. The numbers are going through the roof, particularly in and around Melbourne. So I don't think we're going to see a massive spike in prices. We might see a few more transactions as people move and shift and try and get on with their lives. But the supply-demand disequilibrium overall looks pretty shocking to me.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, if you look at the CoreLogic daily index from yesterday to today, Melbourne's had a rise in property values. Go figure. So now that there's an announcement of the borders there's an announcement that the restriction the restrictions are going to be loosened with a lot of the industries there. There's all of a sudden there's a jump in price. I mean, over the last the last figure I saw, even in Sydney, CoreLogic says that in the daily index that the pricing values have gone up by 0.03%. And I mean, that's ludicrous. Again, I come back to my anecdotal evidence, my on the ground. And this is personal to me. I mean, my colleagues have got other property that they've been following up on in other areas across Sydney that they've been following on, and we compare notes. And this is why we can share this live data evidence to counteract what CoreLogic puts out. But it's really deceiving, Martin. It really is deceiving as to what they can do. But there is a shift. There are the sands are shifting, but at the end of the day, no matter what you buy, no matter where you go, you got to take into consideration what may happen with further economic grenades being thrown at us from all parts, whether it be from other nations or internal effects. Now we're talking about before. I mean, it was only weeks ago that the government was talking, 7, potentially 8% unemployment figures, and now the mainstream are pushing the 10 double-digit unemployment figures, and that's becoming the narrative now, as opposed to what only a few weeks ago it was closer to 7%, 7 to 8%. So where it's really going to land is anybody's guess. But as yourself, Tarek, and we've discussed, we feel it's going to be closer to the 15% as opposed to being closer to the 7%.
Well, it depends how you measure it, of course, because the official numbers are still being artificially suppressed thanks to JobKeeper and the lower engagement rate or utilization rate in terms of employment. In other words, a lot of people are out the market not even looking. So that actually cooks the books in terms of the unemployment rate. But if you took the true rate, and I actually think that the Roy Morgan numbers are probably closer to the truth, then they're a lot higher. And if you take the higher rate from Roy Morgan and include the underemployed, which is another sort of cohort, which basically means they've got some work but not enough work, it's more than 1/5 of the workforce. Now that's just something to squirrel away in your mind when you think about the economic activity. And did you notice that CBA today announced that Tasmania was the shining state in terms of economic activity, but New South Wales was way down the list below Victoria?
Well, we can, as I say, there's, what is it? Lies and statistics, isn't it? Something like
that. Damn lies and statistics, I think. Yeah, I can say that on the channel, but I said it now, so we'll see whether we get pinged. But look,
it should be, lies, damn lies, statistics, and CoreLogic.
Okay. Now, property in focus, Edwin. Here's an interesting example that you've got, which again highlights this disconnection between reality and the index.
Well, that's correct. We're looking at a property in Chatswood. Okay, so this is one of the most recent sales there in Chatswood, and this would magnify even more what's really happening in the disinformation that many of the Australian population get, and that is 68 Hawthorne Avenue, Chatswood. Now, I know this. I've been speaking with the agent. I've been involved in. I was trying to also acquire this property for one of our clients. Now, we know that it sold for, let's say, $1.7 million. It's a 5-bedroom home, 3 bathrooms on a very generous block of land, close to 800 square meters. So it's not a small house. Not a small block of land either. Now, at the beginning of the campaign, the hedonic predictive index put out that it was worth 1.9 or thereabouts with regards to its predictive value. A couple of weeks into the campaign, it came up with a new figure, Martin. Came up with over 2 million for the same property, which is ridiculously high when you think about what's happening in the area. and what's really happening. So we're talking $2.4 million was the predictive guide, or the hedonic guide, which is what they use to come up with the daily index values. And yet, get this, and yet the property actually got sold for no more than 1.7 according to the agent. Now that, again, worlds apart, Martin. So how does it work? How does it work so CoreLogic have increased the value of this property by almost 25%, and yet the true sale price. Now, I make a note that the actual sale price is a guide that's given by the agent. They haven't given me a conclusive point, because of their reasoning that the vendor doesn't want to know. It's not registered with. Has not settled. Blah blah blah. But I can tell you what, Martin, the highest price on the range that I got given is 1.7. We're talking $700,000 apart. So do the math. When you work it back, it's almost a 30% difference in what it actually sold for, and what the hedonic daily index, or the formula that they use to get us to the daily index values, is at. So does that mean that when these figures actually when catch up to the lag, or the reporting lag, does it mean that we're going to see a massive drop in property values later on? It's anybody's guess. All I'm saying is, and highlighting with my properties on focus, is what's really happening out there. So then when you consider the mainstream capitalizing on one or two sales, as to, I look at how wonderful this auction was, and look at the auction clearance rates. They got above the guide, or they got above the reserve by so much, and look at the auction clearance rates that went up from 52% to 54%. Let's break this down. Let's break it down to the nuts and to the nitty gritty, to the nuts and bolts of the whole thing, and work out what's really happening. So what I see happening on the ground is not what's being reflected on the mainstream media. But is it any news, Martin?
Well, I was going to say, tell me the old story. How many times have I heard that over the last couple of years? But I do think the intensity of the gap between reality and media spin is actually increasing. Right? It seems to me that maybe there's an air of desperation. In other words, they're trying to actually talk the market up harder to try and actually pull more people in to be able to actually make it come true harder now than previously. So maybe that's part of the situation. The other point that's worth making is, of course, that the settlement processes can take quite some time, and the settlement data ultimately flows back into the land registry, and presumably that gets sucked back in then into some of the indices. But I don't know. I've never seen definitive evidence of prices being subsequently adjusted down post that process. So, I mean, I just don't know how it works.
Well, look, I have seen prices adjusted down with regards to certain properties and areas, but not everything. I would dare say if you look, I don't know much about computer programs or the like, but I can tell you that a good 50%, if not 60%, of the research that we do with regards to when we apply the CoreLogic figures and the CoreLogic numbers and everything, a good 60% is flawed, and flawed in favor of obviously of the narrative that's been propagated in the mainstream, and this is I take issue with this. And particularly when not only when myself and my colleagues we're dealing with clients, and we have to settle them down and show them what the mainstream are saying and what they're relying on. But then again, as I said before earlier on in our chat, in our rant, and that is these auction clearance rates are also fooling some of our people. some of our people are saying, oh, look, the data, the auction clearance rates have gone up by 2%, so therefore property prices must be really trending upwards. Get a grip. Get a grip and start doing a bit of research, or stop relying on, I don't know what you're relying on, but just get a grip and look at what's really happening. If you really want to get a handle on this, start attending 3, 4, 5, 6 auctions on a weekend, and have your friends attend 3, 4, 5 auctions in other parts of Sydney, and then compare notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, what's interesting, of course, Edwin, is that I've always held the view that the best leading indicator for the trajectory of house prices is the rate of change of total credit, right, for housing. And if you look at that, sure, there are a few first-time buyers buying at the moment. Well, not surprised, because they're being bribed to Billio to do it. But there's a whole lot more people paying down their mortgages like you wouldn't believe, because they're actually quite concerned about their current financial and future financial status. So they're actually wanting to deleverage. And so actually the rate of credit growth is going down, not up. It's slowing. And so that's probably one of the best leading indicators to suggest that the trajectory of prices overall are likely to be lower rather than higher. Now, I know interest rates are lower, and that means that people can, in theory, afford more. But the banks are still a little bit tighter than they were previously in their lending. And property investors, of course, are just walking away completely. So the momentum in the market is very much more narrow now. It's people up trading, it's first-time buyers, very little international interest. And that means that the basis for future price growth is way more limited than many think, I think. And, just the interest rates now are getting to the point where they can't go much lower because we're close to the zero bounds. And so that basically means, unless something remarkable happens, we're going to see prices drift sideways or lower rather than higher. And yet, in the mainstream media, if you read the mainstream, they're all saying, hey, whoopee, prices are taken off again. Well, there is no evidence of that. And as you've explained so well today, a lot of that evidence is puffery, it's smoke and mirrors, it's partial information, and essentially it's spinning a line to try and get more people to come into the market to make it self-fulfilling.
Well, that's right. And other than what you just mentioned, we've also got to look at other factors other than auction clearance rates to determine where values are going to go. Now, you can continue to pump the market. The government can continue to pump the market. The government can continue to give out more subsidies and more grants. They can do all that. But at the end of the day, there are 3 groups that they've got no control, very little control over. One is, as you and I have said, the retirees. They're making decisions to get out, and they are getting out. And that hence the reason why you're starting to see more and more. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen a rise, and we've actually tipped over the 19,000 listings in Sydney, and we've tipped over the 8,500 freestanding home listings in Sydney. And it's not going to take much more than that to continue to destabilize this property market here in Sydney. So it's the retirees on the one hand. On the other hand, as I keep on saying over and over again, don't expect much from China. Expect very little from China. Unless there's the result in America is favourable to China, then of course we'll be forced to open our borders to China. And who knows? Also, Martin, maybe Melbourne's poised to have a travel bubble opening up with China as well. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there, Martin. Just one of those things again. So those unanswered questions. So, but you've got these issues that are happening overseas. So we're not getting the tourism, we're not getting the students, we're not getting the dodgy buyers. People have said to me online, they've said, "Oh yeah, but such and such a property just got bought by a Chinese family." Well, wake up, open your eyes. What you think there are only Caucasians and South Americans living in Australia? And if they've already got the money out of China, they've got it out ages ago. That's why they're sitting here. And I also see Chinese people buying property, or Hong Kongese people buying property. Like I also see Greeks and Italians and South Americans and whatever. Yeah, you can't just say, oh, the Chinese family bought a property in Willoughby or in Chatswood or in Hurstville or this, therefore, Chinese money's back in again. Funny money's back in the game again. No, it's not. There's a lot more happening in China with the government bodies there to stop people from taking money out of China than there has ever been in the history of its existence, Martin. So it's something that people have got to get a grip on, and if anything, as we've discussed with NetEase and the articles that come out on NetEase is a constant push for people that have invested in China, mainly Chinese that have invested in in Australia, for them to sell their assets to take the money back to China because of the uncertainty, the unease that we're facing here, and the potential doomsday scenarios that the Smart North puts out, and property's going to crash by 80%. I mean, that's what they're listening to in there. So that has going to have an effect and an impact on properties being listed on the market. And the third is the people that just want to do the right thing. They don't want to have a debt. They don't want to have the banks chasing them day in, day out, as much as they can wait it out for another 12, 18 months before they get forced to vacate their homes, to hand over the keys. But they just don't want to have any of that. So, but again, going back to, so these are the three grenades, as I call it. These are the three scenarios or three groups of people that could potentially flood the market with property. They will be doing that in Melbourne, more so than in Sydney. But again, let's pull it back, as you say, to a granular level, and that is, folks, we only need 3 homes or freestanding homes for sale in every suburb, which is about 618 suburbs in Sydney, to make a huge impact with regards to supply and demand and the effects that supply and demand is going to have. If we're already having issues, if we can see real live issues as to what's happening now, can you imagine putting another 1,600 properties or 1,800 properties, freestanding homes for sale across Sydney? It is going to be devastating for the vendors. I didn't get clearance on that to share today. As I said last week that I was going to share with the audience. I haven't got clearance on whether I can share that recording that I've got with that agent that is holding on to something like 20 to 25 properties in one suburb, Martin. But he's not the only one. That's not the only agency. There are a number of agencies that since then I've been able to talk a little bit more candid. I haven't recorded them, of course, but I've been able to talk to them off the record, but they can tell me that they are holding on to listings themselves. And they don't want to put them up on the main portal because it's going to scare the crap out of buyers. So in a way, they are doing the right thing by their clients, but overall, the pressure is coming on, and sooner than later, people that you don't have full control of are going to release those properties on the market for sale, and that's going to be mayhem.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I'll add one other final thought for today, and that is, if you start looking across a number of postcodes at the mix between houses for sale and units for sale, right, there is an absolute swing towards units for sale. I mean, I was having to look at Parramatta earlier on, right? 90% of property in the Parramatta postcode for sale are units, 90%, right? And you can look around a number of other postcodes and it's up in the 70s, 80s and 90s, right? So go granular again, but also just understand that the units and the housing sector are not operating in the same market at all. And your point about flooding the market, well, I can tell you that in some postcodes, the markets are already absolutely flooded with units. They're absolutely flooded, and that's why prices are falling, and that's why rentals are falling. And I've been monitoring a few postcodes where, in fact, the prices of some units in some of these relatively newly constructed areas are down now more than 20%. Again, you've got to get granular to really understand what's going on. But I think the unit versus house debate is also worth watching.
Oh, definitely. Look, and as I said, I'm focusing at the moment overall on houses, because that to me shows a greater level of pain that people are feeling, and I know I've just taken a king to that area, because it's magnifying the issues in a greater fashion. Look, yeah, of course, units are also going to start creeping up, but I also know, Martin, that agents have been holding in Sydney units, and even in small, in medium density developments such as townhouses, they're holding 2 or 3, because they don't want to advertise. They don't want to advertise all 5 or all 10, on the blocks for sale, because it's going to impact the values, and developers are doing the same. So if you're holding on to, if you've got 5 units in the same block for sale, well, you're not going to advertise all 5. You'll advertise 2, and you'll have your conversations with your vendors as to why you're advertising 2, but yet in the background you're holding on to theirs for sale, which is what they would call the off market sales, and therefore you can take them through. If they don't like one particular unit, you can take them through the others. So we know that that's happening, but we're just sort of following the trends on domains portals, and the listed numbers on domains, so that people can say, "Oh, you're just making all this up, Edwin. You're just making numbers up." No, I don't make them up. They're there. If you want to follow what the course, they're there. I know, and Martin, that it's much worse than what we're saying, but people take us to task, and they want to see the evidence. Well, that is the evidence. That is, and mark my words, that is what they're going to see. As I said, in the last 3 weeks, we've seen a continual rise. I've said once home listings get to about 9,000 and above, it's on for young and old. It's watch this space. It's get your tub of popcorn and watch it all come down real quick.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, I've got a large pot of popcorn already. And I would also say, Edwin, that clearly your Russian connections have worked wonders for your modem tonight, because your connection has been perfect. So obviously you've got the right contacts there in the background.
Oh, well, it pays to know some Ukrainians. I'd say they're up there with the technology. So yeah, look, and I don't know what I'm going to do with a laptop, but it's, if anybody wants it, I might start up an auction with the intelligence agencies in the States. Who knows?
Well, yeah, something perhaps to put on eBay. Edwin, thanks very much for your time tonight. As always, really insightful comments there on what's going on. A real good dose of reality. And it's just worth underscoring that last point. Our data sources are publicly available data sources, right? The stuff we're saying, the stuff that we're highlighting, you can go and look on the portals and you can see all this stuff, right? It's just a matter of looking in the right places.
That's correct. And look, like as always, Martin, it's always fun having these discussions. It's I don't get bored of talking over certain points over and over again, because things are changing. But we can highlight different things. I'll endeavour to bring up more examples of, in our property in focus, examples of the ones that I deal with personally, as opposed to some of my colleagues deal, because I know them inside out, and I can talk with more authority. But I'll have a chat with the guys and see what they've got happening in other parts of Sydney, as we do. And but look, again, as you say, they can even get to the back end of CoreLogic if they want to do, pay some dollars and get further information from there as well. Or they can call you, and you can give them an inside view of the area of the suburb that they're looking at in particular, which are very, very insightful.
Yeah, well, Edwin, thanks for your time today. Very, very important conversation as always. Take care, and we'll do the same once again next week. Martin North, Digital Finance Analytics. See you next time.